Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I know it's exactly 12 here in Minneapolis. We're just gonna let people gather for another moment, as it might be lunch hour for some, or early morning hour for others. So we're gonna start at just about 12:01. So give you a minute to get situated, and we're gonna start here in a minute. And I hope someone at least has a dual screen of um, gymnastics right now and our webinar. And if you do, please give us live Simone Biles updates too. So very excited about that. And then of course my hometown hero, Suni Lee from St. Paul, Minnesota. Um, all right, so I think we just hit about 100 folks. So I think in the interest of time, I want to keep us moving and we'll get going. We are recording today's session too. So if for some reason you're not able to join us for the whole time, we'll send you a recording. And if you're able to join us, but someone else wasn't, we'll send you that recording as well. So we're really excited to be here today. Let's get started. Um, my name is Alex Oftali from BWF. I'm a Senior Vice President of Decision Science, and I have some wonderful colleagues today joining me, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
I can unmute. Hi, I'm Tracy Story. I am the Associate VP for Nonprofit Enterprise Strategic Planning, and I am super excited to be a part of this group today.
Hey, everybody. I'm Reed Tyler. I'm the Associate Managing Vice President of Business Intelligence, and also really interested and love this conversation. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And yeah, so we're all colleagues here at BWF. And I was joking that we actually look a little bit like an Olympic team. So I have our flag here for us. So we're going forth and we're excited in the spirit of the Olympics. We all just happen to wear similar clothes. Doesn't happen a lot at BWF. But if you're not familiar with BWF, we're a comprehensive consulting firm. And we're very proud of a lot of things. Being data rigorous, innovation, and specialization are three of those things that we're most excited about that really relate to a lot of the conversation that we're going to be having with you today. And, a few quick facts about us. I was holding this up. We just celebrated 40 years last year. So this is actually our 41st year. And you can see from the map, we're fortunate enough to work at many places all over the world. But what we're going to be talking about here today, really can't stress this enough. From building out strategy and strategic thinking is relevant for no matter where you are in the world, or no matter the mission of your organization, or no matter the size of your organization. So if you're raising 2 million or 2 billion, what we're going to be talking about here, we still believe and is relevant for you, and we partner with clients every day on this. A few housekeeping elements as we go through the webinar. Thank you, Vicki, for the happy 40th shout out. If you have a Q&A, please submit your questions. We're going to hold off on questions till the end. So, but please submit them as you go, and we'll be able to get to those. And then you'll be receiving an email with the recording and another little special surprise we're going to share with you at the end. And then at the very end of the survey here today, there's going to be a QR code. We really love the opportunity to share and have a conversation with this community, and we'll also love to hear what you thought about that. So please give us feedback around what worked well and what else you need that would be helpful for you in your role and your organization. So to help us understand a little bit of the context of this, and we were pretty excited looking at the attendee list and kind of the mix of people who signed up, we're going to have two quick poll questions that are going to help Tracy, Reed, and myself really kind of focus the context of our conversation to really fit this audience today. So we have two polls, and our fantastic colleague Lauren is tell me a little bit about what best describes your role. So are you an executive, a fundraising executive, manager? Are you an individual contributor? Take a couple seconds. We'll let about 25 seconds go, and let us know who you are. now I think I know how Bob Barker feels. So, so I'm gonna go ahead and survey says, are the results? Lauren, can everyone see the results? I believe so. Hopefully everyone gets Reed and Tracy, can you all see the results? Oh yeah, you can see them. Great, thank you. Sorry. So a lot of fundraisers here, part of this. Welcome. Glad to have you as part of strategy and data conversations. We're really excited. It's not all just folks on the technology side. That's my love. That's where my heart is. But excited there's a larger community with us. And we have one more question that we would like to ask, which is how engaged are you today in developing strategy for your organization? And be honest, this is an anonymous poll, so we're, you can tell us where things really are today. Are you decision maker? Do you contribute? Do you participate and provide information? Are you not involved at all? There's just a few more seconds here. All right. So a few decision makers, but a lot of contributors and a lot of the team, which is great. So you're our people. We got a lot of lieutenants and corporals and captains, which is a lot of the partnerships that Reed, Tracy, and I have in our work as well. It's also nice that there's not a ton of people who are completely uninvolved. So everyone here has a stake. Everyone here has some experience. So we're excited to be able to talk through some of the things that we have learned that we think would be of help for you and your organization moving ahead.
So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about strategic planning overall. As I indicated at the beginning, part of what BWF does, part of what I get to do in my role at BWF is to work with clients on a regular basis to help them really craft strategic plans for their organizations. And strategic plans, sometimes people have a little bit of skepticism about them, a little bit of cynicism because of their experiences. But I think, obviously, because this is what I do, that they can be really important in helping your organization articulate and come to a collective understanding about your core commitments, how you want to live out those core commitments for a specific period of time in response to your particular circumstances, and then make sure that you're aligning your resources and the focus and energy of your team so that you're all kind of pulling in the same direction, and that those resources aren't being sort of dispersed or the impact is lost as you all kind of move in different directions. So we want to talk about strategic planning today, really, as it plays a role in the overall organization's sort of strategy development as it sits in different areas. And one of the ways that I think about strategic planning is in some ways by thinking about what it's not. Strategic planning can be such a Rorschach and mean so many different things to different people. So I thought I'd take a minute to sort of talk about it in terms of what it isn't. So strategic planning should not be a one-time event, something that you did, 10 years ago and it sits on a shelf and you don't reference it. It should be something that's revisited on a regular basis. It should not be a static document, even if you refresh it every 3 or 5 years. In the meantime, it needs to be a living document that you continue to look at and think about and evaluate. It is not itself a substitute for leadership. It doesn't necessarily give you all the answers. It's a tool to help you develop them and have some sort of conversations with your team and your constituents about it. It's also, I think this is in some ways the most important and the most misunderstood part of strategic plans, is they are not themselves a guarantee of success. That strategic planning by its very nature is about making some projections and some best guesses and some big bets in terms of what you think your organization can do, what it should do, respond to its environment, and what kind of impact it can have in the future. So it gives you a roadmap and it gives you a tool to get there, but it doesn't promise or guarantee that you'll get there, right? It's still always a little uncertain and a little bit of a project. It's not itself a crisis management tool. I think it's very important to have one, and it will help inform your response, but it doesn't serve that role. It's informed by your trends and your analysis of those trends, but it is not itself simply a reflection of those trends. And it should never be only about financial goals or something that you produce sort of in the moment or on impulse or in response to one data point. It should be part of a comprehensive process. So we think about then what the strategic plan can do and what it can look like. Strategic plans in many ways, as I have sort of worked with a variety of organizations on them, the work of actually building that strategic plan really takes place in three big chunks, if you think about it. It takes place in a discovery phase, a phase where you spend your time sort of understanding where you are. Often that includes a lot of sort of looking back at where you used to be and understanding how you got to where you are. It includes looking outside the organization at your broader environment, and then looking internally about what are your capacities, what are your challenges, so that you can understand where you are and what might be possible for you. It includes a second phase, which is often one where you have fewer participants, but is really a very important moment where you take that information about where you are and what your situation is, what your environment's like, and you look at then your core commitments, your mission statement, and what are the things that your organization must do in order to achieve on those core commitments. And you end up in this generative phase where you think about how can you best respond to your current circumstance, take advantage of opportunities and respond to challenges to generate sort of an aspirational sort of goal for your organization, and then individual high level sort of goals that will make up the bulk of your strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years. From that, you then translate into kind of a development of a blueprint, or often a roadmap, where you take those high level goals and you go, okay, so actually what is this going to mean in Q1 of year 1 and Q3 of year 2, and you build out sort of that set of initiatives and those tactics that are going to get you there. At the end of that, you should have a robust strategic plan that's based upon sort of that information, that generative work, and that blueprint development work. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is in some ways about who gets that seat around the table as you go through those 3 phases. So the providing insights phase, where you sort of gather up the information and you look at the current capacities. This is often a broader base of participation. The generative phase, as I've said, is often sort of a smaller group of people are brought around the table, for good or ill, as they're created, but those tend to be more leadership level conversations. And then the tactics phase, again, sort of drives down back into the overall organization with sort of teams or individuals being asked to contribute to the thinking about building those and identifying the resources required. Specifically for the data team, though, we wanted to talk about where they often sit. So, you have this current state, this insights into the strategy and the objectives and tactics. So on the next slide, thank you, Reed. We can talk a little bit about where we typically find folks. So the data team is often very involved in gathering up the information about their current state. What's the information we have, say, about past giving, or about past activity, or about employee retention, or about sort of budgetary trends, helping to understand the environment. They're often very much involved as well into developing the objectives and tactics, both because some of those goals may fall within the scope of responsibility for that group, but also very often they are asked to then develop sort of the dashboards or the KPIs, or to identify sort of metrics and objective sort of evaluation tools for the plan itself, so that you can review and understand the success you're making on achieving those individual goals. They are not often involved in those generative conversations, though, unfortunately. And I think what we're advocating for today, and what I think is really important as you think about strategic planning going forward, is to include the data team in that process. That it is really important that they be part of those generative conversations, not in a sort of providing additional information or in fact checking sort of where the leadership team may be going, but as full constituents at the table, participating in the conversation about what's possible. And this is what we're calling a more modern approach, where that sort of overall enterprise strategy is developed with the full participation of the data strategy team. And I think as we go forward in this presentation, you'll begin to see why we think it is so important, particularly now. It always has been, but it's even more important as we go forward in this current environment, for the folks on the data strategy side and on the data team to be included in those conversations as full participants.
So I would like, if someone wants to speak up in the chat, how many organizations represented here? How many of you have a data strategy? We have an analytics strategy, right? We have campaign strategy for a major principal gift prospect. We may have a solicitation strategy, but I'm curious how many organizations here have what they would consider a data strategy. likely going to be very few. And this is something that Tracy and Reed and I have really been doing a lot of work around and understanding this key component as a real kind of maybe gap area. We have some of the components of it, I think, and I'm going to walk through what I mean by data strategy, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth. But this really gets at the heart of strategic planning for a 21st century fundraising organization, right? And so it's really from the bottom up, not just top down. You know, we all love the big gifts and we love to celebrate that success and those relationships, but really it's bottom up is where we're going to be moving forward as technology and innovation really drives the opportunities for us to harness and leverage data as our most valuable resource. And so while it would be great if we were starting this from the beginning of inventing a nonprofit and starting out with data strategy first and building this as we go, I realize a lot of this is a little bit of building the plane or improving the plane while it's flying. So that's where most of the organizations that we've partnered with or have shared this information with us, that's where they are as well. That's okay. But we could start from here, and I'm going to walk through some of the things to think about when you're considering a data strategy as the foundational piece that's going to allow us to build up how we use data to drive our program forward that Reed and Tracy are going to share more in depth. So when we start out with a data strategy, I think the first part we have to is where are we getting our data from? And thinking about our data collection in a couple different ways. How are we collecting the data? What are the sources? There's a lot of really exciting innovation happening right now and a lot of things in technology that's giving us new access and opportunities to data. But I really think it's also giving rise to a very important distinction in a conversation I recommend you all have, the difference between first party and third party data. And so what's first party data? That's data that only you have about the people in your database. No one else in the world has access to that information. Third party data is data that's publicly available. Anyone can find out that I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, or I like to cook. You can go on my social media. It's full of cooking photos, right? So that's not very hard to figure out. And so we have different sources of data, different accuracy, different ways that we're collecting it. Are we collecting it? Is it a lot of data that we've had traditionally has been self-reported, right? And so are we collecting new ways to scrape and capture some of the data? Are we doing survey data, transaction data, et cetera? So, think about this, starting with where is this data coming from and what are the sources? So that's the very first. A lot of people just kind of, we got data, where did it come from? I'm not really sure, but we have it here and it's here now. I think starting with where are we collecting it from and being mindful of those sources, I think is where we start with building out a data collection strategy. So now when we're collecting data, and I know this is the most exciting topic, but it actually really is super important if you build it out in a purposeful, almost a linear approach. Then we think about how are we storing it, and what are we doing to ensure its accessibility and its quality and its security. Okay, so there's lots of, again, new technology, new innovations. Lake houses is a common thing we're seeing between structured data warehouse and unstructured data. Obviously the cloud and other technologies present some really interesting, exciting opportunities, but security is also something we need to be very mindful of. And then along with data collection, as we're bringing data in and storing it, what are we doing, or have we thought about it all process to ensure the data is accurate, it's consistent, it's reliable, and we could trust it. Again, the amount of unverified, kind of unprocessed data that we see on a regular basis with clients, I think is a risk for them, and it's a risk for them to be able to leverage and consistently leverage that data moving forward. So starting with collection, moving to management, and then to my favorite topic, of course, which is data governance. So what are the rules of the road and the policies and standards that we have for using, sharing, compliance? Obviously, there's things that we are legally required to do, which is important, but also who's responsible for what. Reed and Tracy and I are working right now with a client, and we've talked a lot about this idea of data citizenship, right? And so if you're a fundraiser or you work in IT or you're in prospect development, you're all interacting with data in a different way, but we all have a responsibility within our role and from our seat to contribute and be good citizens of our organization? And what are those roles and responsibilities? I've even seen some organizations, some very kind of progressive organizations on the performance management side, include data citizenship as an element of performance review. You need to do these things to be a good citizen in your role to our organization. Are you doing those things? So coming up with the rules of the road, the policies and procedures, it's objective, everyone can follow by it, and that further gives us some security and ensures compliance and risk management. So we talked about collecting, managing, rules of the road, all the exciting stuff that builds us up to this sense of analysis. And then what are we going to do? So notice when we're talking about data strategy, this is all leading up to, this is the fourth slide that I've been on this topic now. A lot of times when Reed and I connect with people in the industry, they start with tools and techniques. And they start with, oh, I saw this great idea, or this other client did this, or I just got back from a case district 2, and this is great. And we love that. This is kind of, we love talking shop about these topics. We think they're very important. This is the wrong place to start the conversation. So we need to go all the way back to square one to build up to this. And this ensures that we're going to be able to consistently and reliably create innovation that we can reproduce, and innovation that's going to drive our business forward. So we can't just start with a fancy new software piece. And I do not recommend just starting with, I learned to code this technique online. Let's start at the very beginning of understanding where's our data coming from, how are we storing it, what are the rules that we're all going to play by. Now let's get to work. Then from that comes, and these are all plans and documentation that we recommend building out, and we'll have some resources that we're going to share after this webinar, frameworks of how to do this. Then you get into the really fun stuff, and it's the concept of data utilization. And for a lot of organizations that I've had the fortune to work with, this is where we start to transition, and we talk a lot about using data and analytics and converting from a noun to a verb. And it's not a score, and it's not a chart, and it's not a rating, but really it becomes part of the decision-making process. And we're going to figure out how much more staffing do we need? Well, we have a lot of things to consider, and data really has a role to play at the table. Or where should we invest or reallocate resources for event planning? Or how much can we really extend our campaign goal? Data should, we believe, be at the core of every one of those conversations, along with environmental data, subjective data, contextual data. There's lots of pieces of information. But the folks that are using it well, when they're building up, understanding through collection, how we're storing, the rules of the road, what we can create, these are the organizations that are finding the most success, becoming data-driven, and data utilization and analytics being integrated in all their business processes.
All right, so now let's talk about how the data strategy fits into the overarching strategic planning. And I think we can break this down into 2 components. One of them being pretty much everything that Alex says. Do we have a strategy around all of the activities that ensures that our data is accessible, reliable, there's quality, and it's usable, and then it's actually being used by folks? If we think about data as a strategic asset, any other strategic asset, like if we owned a helicopter, we would ensure that it's maintained and it works, right? And it's safe. We want to do the same thing with data. So thinking about all the components that Alex just talked about, that's part of the data strategy. But now, how do we integrate the actual application of data into our strategic conversations so that there's relevant and accurate evidence that is informing our strategic decisions and goals? So let's start there. Thinking about data-driven objectives. Now, this process sometimes starts in a vacuum, and really where it needs to start is at the baseline. And the effort needs to be using descriptive analytics to look behind you and say, where have we come? Where did we grow? What did we do the best at? What are some opportunities to improve, and what are some of those gaps? And once we have an understood baseline, from there and only there can we start looking forward. And that's where predictive and forecasting and simulation comes in. We can use these tools to now adjust the levers that then create the goal in the future. Alex talked a little bit about campaign planning and, if we have a goal of $500 million, well, when can we hit that target? And what levers can we pull to hit that target? Using predictive analytics, we can tell that story. And then finally, the aspirational piece, once we have that set, we can be prescriptive about how we take that journey. What steps do we need to take? And what are the best decisions to make along the way? One of the things, before I move on, we were talking about this as a group the other day, and Tracy just had some really relevant and interesting insight. And so I want to invite her to talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, so when Reed shared this slide with me, I got really excited because it struck me as a really great example of exactly why we thought that this webinar, might be helpful to folks, and why we get excited when we talk together about both data strategy and strategic planning for nonprofits, because they are so complementary and they're so codependent on each other. So when Reed showed this to me, I thought, well, in some ways it parallels so much the strategic planning process, where you understand where you are, you think about what's possible, and then you identify your aspirational goal and you go for it. But it's also a place where I think this is why the strategic planning that takes place at the enterprise level is really critical for the data strategy development, because the predictive forecasting that Reed talks about shows you what is possible for the organization, but it doesn't tell you which one is the right one to select. At the end of the day, the overall enterprise, the nonprofit at the highest level, needs to make some business decisions about where they're going to put their energy and their focus and where they want to take the organization going forward. Once they provided that overall guidance, it becomes the data strategy can be more effective and aligned with those institutional goals and in support of them. So it can help you sort of understand, of the various things that you might do, we should really lean in and look closely at these 2 or 3 to understand which might be more effective in delivering on the business goals that we've identified and our role in achieving them. So I just thought it was a really nice symmetry that was highlighted as you put this together.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, one of the things I love about that story is, as a data professional, my job is to get people right to the edge of that decision. And so there's no work to be done to get to that edge, but we don't want to push them off the edge. Our goal is to set up the best options possible and let the experts in that area make those decisions. So thanks for highlighting that. So the first thing I think about is resource allocation and using data in an optimal way to think about how to best steward your donations. How do you optimize your investment? So using data and predictive analytics and such, we can use those tools and leverage those tools to, as we talked about, adjust those levers and decide what's going to maximize the overall fundraising outcomes. Second to that is KPIs and metrics. And everybody on this call, I'm sure, understands KPIs and metrics. And what I want to highlight is not necessarily KPIs and metrics for fundraising progress, because that's usually the only place we see it, but turning inside and thinking about all the goals in our individual role that is going to contribute to that overarching strategic process and what those high-level goals are, and developing the KPIs and metrics based on those. So it's not a tangible dollar in the door, but it's an effort to align my behaviors and what I'm doing as an individual contributor or as middle management or senior management, and how that aligns with my efforts and goals that support the overarching strategic plan. And then thinking about risk management. Now, I love this space and we don't see a lot of it, but I see a lot of opportunity here. You see it a little bit more in the private industry, but thinking about predictive analytics in terms of shifting the lens, not towards your donors, but towards your internal staff. I think HR is the most relevant, easy, clear example to provide predictive analytics to prevent attrition, right? If we're embarking on a campaign, one of the biggest challenges is retaining our staff so that we have consistent progress. What if we could be proactive about that and identify the folks that are maybe more likely to leave, apply our predictive analytics, and then be proactive about helping them and fine-tuning them and giving them what they need and bubbling up those opportunities. And then enhanced decision-making. I think data-driven decisions is maybe a loosely used word. And I don't think it's just using a dashboard and saying, here's the progress to goal, there we go, I'm data driven. I think it's more than that. I think it's surrounding yourself with all the tools and applications and all of the relevant data products that help you make every decision and help make every meeting more impactful and more efficient. So for example, I think about the new space of generative AI, ChatGPT. That's making me 10x efficient with helping me with decisions, with helping me with mundane tasks, all of these things. But that's just one example of the tools you should be surrounding yourself with so that you can be more efficient in your decision-making process. And then, of course, we always have to improve, and we have to have formal feedback loops so that we can encourage that open communication, and then it's formalized so we can hold ourselves accountable. We also have to think with strategic planning and also data strategy. We have to be nimble and we have to be agile so that we can, it's not set in stone, here are the rules, here are the goals. If our environment changes, like the pandemic, we have to be agile and be able to adjust quickly to that. Having feedback loops and open communication just makes that process easier.
So we have some thoughts about how you can really lean into this idea of the sort of implementation and complement between strategic planning and data strategy for leaders. And then we're going to talk a little bit of it as sort of some recommendations for those of you on that data and system side. I know I've seen in the chat that it sounds like some folks are really struggling to have their voices heard by their leadership team. And we're definitely going to address that going forward. And I can fold a little bit of it in here. But I heard you and I saw the people echoing what Anne said about their being a little demoralized in their experience working with leadership. It's exactly why we thought this was an important conversation to have. So for the leaders who are on the call, or the leaders that you may encourage to think about this, we definitely have some things to advise them to sort of consider doing to build up their sort of strength and their focus in this area. So I think the best thing that the leaders can do is to really clearly articulate those vision and priorities for the organization so that the teams that go forward can really understand the direction that the organization's going and the rationale for it, to break it down not only in that overall vision, but then to think about sort of how you actually achieve that success and how you break it down. I think we also, on the next slide, thank you, have some suggestions about sort of really encouraging leaders to lean in to sort of, asking questions of their data team, thinking of data not as a verb versus a noun, that it shouldn't be really viewed as scores and charts, but it's an overall approach. It's an activity, something that we encourage them to engage in. I think if we can just humble myself slightly with one example here about the importance of asking questions, among the three of us, I am not the data person. I'll never in my life probably write a line of code or build a dashboard or do any of that work. But I have, as a result of sort of being forced to ask questions of our data team, come to really appreciate the importance of doing that. In my previous position at a large institution in higher education, I served as chief of staff and was asked to move into the role temporarily running the operations team, which was in the middle of a CRM implementation, which is a lot of hanging out by my fingertips every day, asking a lot of questions of the technology team and of the data team, and really trying very hard to understand some of their challenges. And what I realized in one of the conversations, I had a real light bulb moment when I finally understood that the leadership team's years-long frustration over our inability to get a stable lifetime giving number was not a failure of the tools that the technology team was using or their skill at sort of pulling data out of our system. It was a leadership failure and a business failure on our side, not to define clearly as an institution what we meant by leadership, by lifetime giving, so that it could then be built into the logic of our systems in the background and then drive and feed forward into all the systems. So that on any given day, when you looked at a report that you pulled out of our database and a dashboard at the same time, you would get the same number, because we've made a business decision about what that number was meant to represent. And we had failed to do that at an institution. And all of our frustration with the technology team should have been focused on ourselves. And I realized then that we have to ask questions about why things are happening and not simply sort of request a new version or, ask for an updated report. And I encourage those of you in leadership level to really ask the questions about why things are happening so that you can understand it better and potentially make really, really transformative decisions for your organization. Part of that obviously will mean that, you have to sort of maintain a culture of curiosity, read some articles, attend some webinars, be okay not understanding every single thing that's happening, but ask those questions, really participate in data literacy programs if you have the time. And I think really live in a place where it's not okay for you to not understand that part of your operation. You need to understand the entirety of what your operation does at a similar level, and really lean into trying to do that. I think, part of what I learned, of course, is that open communication is really important, and making sure that folks understand the overall enterprise goals and that they are reflected in the individual groups and teams goals, so that they align up and serve the ends of your strategic plan and your overall organization's mission. And then finally, and I think really importantly, thinking a little bit differently potentially about budget allocation and supporting different initiatives. In today's environment in particular, when you want to sort of move the needle on your overall, say, fundraising totals for your organization, it's no longer obvious that the way to do that is to sort of hire a new frontline fundraiser and populate a new pool and send them out into the world. It may be that part of what you want to do is to really resource differently your data and analytics team so that you can be more efficient and effective, or build up sort of new tools that make those other operations work a little bit differently, and can still get an overall increase in your yield of fundraising. It's no longer clear when you want to pull the lever on fundraising what that means in terms of which part of the operation you should focus on. And I think the next slide is.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to quickly highlight that Tracy had said before we move on is it's not up to the data professionals to define metrics, and it's not up to the business solely to define it. It's collaboration. I mean, working together to create those definitions is key, as somebody said in the chat. But it's that collaboration piece. So the first thing I think that data professionals should do is understand their industry and develop their business acumen. So that's not just like the what your organization is fundraising for, but think about the whole philanthropy landscape. Pay attention to those trends. Pay attention to those news articles. What is McKinsey Scott doing? And so you can understand the challenges of the day, because it's going to help you be more forward thinking when now you're applying data strategies and analytics and all this to actual operations. The second is to really understand your organization's strategic plan, how they develop the strategic plan, and what it means for you and your teams. Secondly is to improve communication skills. And I don't mean this by way of you need to send better emails and you need to be a better presenter. This instead needs to be I think a very, I don't know, this is a difficult skill to get, but if you can articulate data that's not just, here's what's the data is telling us, but then being able to break it down in non-complex, actionable steps for non-technical people, that is a skill that everybody should focus on. And what it takes is practice. Engaging stakeholders. So this is the notion of, be friendly, be friends with your colleagues, try to understand their perspective, where they're coming from, what their challenges are at work, what they do at work. And, if you can just gain that perspective, you can start to think about efficiency and technology that they can apply to their roles to make their lives easier.
In the spirit of that one, though, Reed, can you go back one slide again? In addition to the idea of translation, and in the spirit of the Olympics, run through the tape and run through what you're doing. So what do I mean by that? I mean, when I'm starting a project with a client, I might be very focused on a very specific small kind of question, maybe a single question, maybe a few kind of focus questions around performance, potential, productivity, etc. I try to step back and I try to say, how is this going to help them raise more money? Right? Which is really, at the end of the day, what we're all here to help us doing. So what you might be working on or what you might be sharing may not directly mean, hey, we'll do this, more money. This is going to help Reed do that, which is going to support Tracy into expanding this, which is going to open us up to new opportunities for increasing donor acquisition. So run through the tape, and even if you're not doing it externally with your colleagues and collaborators, in your own head, it's always helpful to connect back what we're doing in a specific task, whether it's analytics, whether it's technology, whether it's data governance, which is so exciting for folks. Understand that, hey, if we have rules of the road and we create data citizens, that means we're going to leverage our data more, which we're going to create sharper focus and insights and efficiency, which is going to help us raise more money. So run through the tape on that statement or on that question, and it helps you kind of focus and give you some clarity on the relation of what you're doing or sharing to the larger picture, and that can also help you translate and share that with others.
So second to last, thinking about collaborating with leaders, and this is difficult for folks because there's an obvious power dynamic in play, and leaders are busy, and it's tough to get time with them. But seek opportunities to collaborate. I think good leaders always resonate with the idea of collaboration. And so if there's joint planning opportunities, say you've been asked to deliver data around this strategy, why not just deliver it yourself during the strategy meeting? That eliminates any additional telephone game of follow-up on data, this or that. And that's really where the innovation can happen. And then feedback loops. Ensure that you have a direct line of communication with your leaders. Ask them for ways to improve, or does this dashboard or this predictive model work for you? What are the challenges with it? What don't you understand? What can I do better the next time, or how can I improve? I think that's so important. And then promoting data-driven culture. So this is another thing that's challenging when you're not at the top of the organization, but it's something you can still accomplish, and I think you can be successful. First is empowering teams. So this is conducting training sessions, this is holding workshops, just opening the door.
I think it looks like Reed froze slightly. So we're gonna pick it up and say, right, that this idea of sort of highlighting the success of your projects. I was actually gonna jump in here and say, I think when you highlight the success of your projects, one of the strongest things you can do by framing the success in a way that aligns with the language that the organization is using at the enterprise level. So echo their strategic plan, echo their overall mission statement, echo their vision statement, and show how your work sort of got you there. Even if it's incremental, it's okay. But if you frame it in language that is aligned with the overall institution way, you'll sound like your leaders, you'll sound like a leader, and it's more likely to be sort of embraced by folks across the organization. Reed, it looks like you're back.
Looks like I'm back. I don't know how long I was gone for, so thanks, Tracy. So I'll turn it over to Alex. What can everybody do?
Well, yeah, well, so there's a few things we can do. And starting today, what we did, a lot of people know me as a survey forward or survey positive person. We put together, it's wrong title here. It's actually a data culture maturity assessment. So we put together an assessment template, and we're going to send you a copy of that link. So it's something you can take online, and it's going to allow you to rate your organization on strategic alignment and leadership, data literacy and skills, communication and collaboration, and where you feel the state of data-driven projects and their impact is today. So that'll give you kind of a comprehensive score. And we have some scales and ratings, of course, to kind of where you are, and then you get to really see where you feel your organization is strong and moving ahead, and where it might be lagging. So that's a resource that we're going to be sending out along with the recording in the next 48 hours. So you'll be able to take that, and our hope is that gives you your own objective assessment to say, hey, where are we today? It'll create a report for you. You can share it with colleagues. You can share it with leaders at your organization and say, hey, I've heard some folks talking about some very interesting ways to integrate data into strategic planning. This is where I feel we are. What do you think? What should we do to address this? So that's a resource that we've developed. It's one that we've used with other clients. So we're excited to be able to just share that with you, and we hope it's of use and of value for you.
Before we open it up for questions, we just wanted to sort of reiterate a couple of points. Obviously, collaboration is one of the key themes that we're advocating for here across leadership and data professionals, taking that data culture, not survey, but the tool that they put together to help you understand where you are. And to really, as leaders, sort of embrace your organization's needs for you to really become fluent and more familiar with the data decision making, excuse me, and the overall strategy. And then as data professionals, really picking up the language of the organization, leveraging their strategic planning, leveraging their statements about themselves and who they want to be to help serve the needs of your organization and your team better so that you can ultimately serve the organization well. Those are some of the key things that we wanted to share with you. I know we have some questions that maybe we want to move to in the 15 minutes we have left that are in the chat and in the question things. While you're doing it, if you want to grab this QR code and give us some feedback on this webinar, that would be great. But I'm going to move to the questions if that works for everybody.
Yeah, Lindsay, we will have a strong contingent APRA PD this year in Seattle. And make sure to go eat at Din Tai Fung if you like xiaolong bao and soup dumplings because they're fantastic. So sorry, Tracy, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I'm glad you're reading it. So Emily's been waiting, I think, for an answer for a couple of these questions for a little bit. So I'm going to at least jump into those first. And one of them I think is mine, which is questions about what influences the successful implementation. It's really a couple of things. I think that when you don't have a good annual planning process and you don't create a clear process and a bridge from strategic planning to your annual planning, that creates real challenges in the successful implementation of the strategic plan, obviously. But I think more importantly, it's a question of how well you identify owners of the particular elements of that strategic plan, and do you have regular check-ins and hold folks accountable to it? I think it's a little bit about how you communicate with it, but honestly, I think one of the key things that are the decisions you make early in the strategic plan about whether or not you are going to be disciplined enough to identify things that you are going to stop doing, as well as things that you're going to lean into and do more. The capacity of your organization's probably working at capacity. And so when you do a strategic plan and you just add to it and you don't take anything away, you make it very hard for your staff. You make it very hard for your volunteers and others to really support you effectively. And so I think, that's a really important part of it. So did you identify what you're going to stop doing? Did you communicate effectively about the plan itself? Who owns the elements of it? And do you have a way to make it live in a meaningful way in your annual operational planning are the things that I see make a real difference in terms of implementation. I thought I might just open it to the floor for the next question we had, though, which is about sort of how you align sort of the DEIB goals of an organization, with those on the analytics team. So Emily asks, particularly in your experience, how do we make sure that analytics align with our DEIB goals regarding the culture of our org, and not only benefit those in the majority if our office is not diverse in all of the ways that we would like it to be?
Yeah, great question. So DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. The terms used by some, not maybe in case others weren't aware of that acronym. Analytics can play a role, but one thing that's interesting about, or I think we have to consider, whereas a lot of things we're measuring with analytics is outcomes, what we should be and doing our best where we can when it comes to DEIB related areas of emphasis is we're measuring opportunities. Okay, so we can't just be like, let's get more of this group and turn the dial. And let's crank up the amount of people with glasses in a blue blazer. Let's turn that dial, and we're going to have some increased growth or participation. So when we're thinking about, just by nature of its inclusion, what we should really be focused on is, are we doing our best to provide and increase opportunities for participation? Whether or not they do, I hope they do. I would like them to. But that really shouldn't be the measure, is that outcome, much like we're measuring other stuff. It's, are we doing our best to provide opportunity, and understanding that at that point, we did our best, it's out of our hands. If it's successful, that's great. If it's not, maybe we can learn and say it wasn't. Maybe let's try a different approach or a different strategy. But again, it's a slight twist of the focus, but we're not looking at outcomes. We want to be measuring are we providing opportunities? And so if we're thinking about diversity and inclusion, that is the best measure, and doing our best to understand we're giving everyone a chance to be a part of what we're doing and participate and be a part of our community. And how do we measure giving that chance, that opportunity, not did they? Because that collects a whole bunch of external things, which environmental things, which are often beyond our control, societal things, legacy things. So let's focus not on outcomes. We're thinking about diversity and inclusion, but let's focus on providing and doing our best to increase opportunity.
Yeah, and Alex, I might add to that just a little bit. Thinking about the everyday donor and the argument for the everyday donor, that is the organization's intentionality to provide that opportunity, right? Not only is it going to fuel major gifts in the future because you're creating your pipeline, but you're also allowing everybody to have a voice and being intentional about it.
I think that's
But Emily brings up a good point about the intentionality of it. You know, traditionally, or in kind of a legacy philanthropic model, we kind of look like at scale, or for the everyday donor, we've been asking the question, well, who gave? And what a new approach is, and I think is going to be continue to be a leading approach, is, well, who did we ask? And who did we open to? And who did we invite? And it's a little bit more of an expansive look around providing opportunity for involvement, participation in the community, whatever that means. So I think you're starting to see philanthropy shift in that way, and I think it's going to be the better for it too. I know we have just a few minutes left. Was there any other questions or comments related to building up data strategy to drive and be a part of the comprehensive strategic planning process, and how to include this along with all the other elements? Tracy could do an 8-hour webinar on strategic planning overall, because she's our expert at it, and she's the person that I go to for these questions. But I just want to know if there was any other questions that were coming up right now. I know this is could be both a focused and large topic, and so there's probably a lot of things swirling around. We do have our emails listed on the screen, and if you've participated in any conversations with Tracy Reed or myself, you know, we'll talk about this stuff all day too. So, you know, please feel free to follow up with us directly if you have questions or would like to know more, or definitely, which we haven't had a lot of opportunity to do, but if you have some examples of success or lessons learned, that's why we love opportunities like this, is we get to interact with you all after this conversation today, and we learn as much as we feel we share too. So, you know, keep the communication lines flowing, and definitely share with us what you've learned and the successes and things that you're saying, I'm never going to do that again. Sorry, Tracy, I feel like I've cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say I agree with all of this, and I would just offer to folks, if you, especially those who are on the data side who are experiencing some of that challenge and being heard by their leadership, you know, you could certainly send them a recording of this webinar. You can do some of that, but there's also I have a blog post, for example, on the BWF site about the importance of including everybody around the table for those important conversations about strategic planning. You know, sharing sometimes some of that perspective that it's not just an issue of optics, it's an issue of, you will write a stronger plan if you include everybody around the table. And, you know, there are resources that I have, there are lots of folks in the industry that share similar resources that talk about the importance of this, and maybe just, you know, sort of sending some of those up the chain might help start some conversations.
I've been advocating my whole career, so I'm always happy to talk shop with others to share from my perspective what I've learned and what can be successful. And again, we love learning from you all as well. So again, as I promised, in the next 24 to 48 hours, you're going to receive an email. It's going to have a copy of this slide deck, a link to the recording available in case you want to go back and rewatch it. And the most important part, that data culture maturity assessment. And so again, that's that little online rubric that you're going to be able to take and produce a scorecard for yourself, and we've provided a range, so we're going to give you the BWF judgment of where we feel you are right now, but that's information for you to have, and if you want to follow up with us and talk further about it, we're available, but that's something for you to use internally in your organization and be a conversation starter, and maybe even strategic planning starter. So with that, we appreciate the time on this Wednesday, Tuesday. It's Tuesday today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful morning and afternoon, and look forward to continuing the conversation soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.